I am so pleased to introduce Nancy Koziol, who's going to talk to us about her origin story. I met Nancy a few years ago. I think you put out a call, you needed extras for a promotional video, and I signed Matt and I up, and we met Dan and Christy. And then Nancy hosted, we hosted at the Bennington Station a Couch and Cork event right before Thanksgiving, and it was awesome. Mike and Sarah were there, Dan and Christy, some other folks, and I've been kind of a Couch and Cork groupie since, going to different events at Park McCullough and at the museum. So I'm so pleased to have Nancy with us and telling us more about her woman-owned business.
Yeah, it does.
It does? Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Beth. Thanks, everybody, and thanks for having me. I'm going to use notes. I don't usually use notes, but I rewrote this about 7 times, so this is the one I'm going with. I think you're lucky I'm going with this one. So, in late 2014, I had a nightmare job. It wasn't when I was co-teaching with John Gagnon over there. That was an amazing job. And we were also hosting a terrible exchange student, and we've hosted a lot, but this one gave us a run for our money. So these things, along with being away from Bennington since 2007, really caused kind of an early-ish midlife crisis for us. And so I decided to do this thing that I was seeing in TVs and movies where women just quit their jobs without a plan and throw caution to the wind. I don't know if anyone here has ever done that, has ever quit their job without a plan, but it is not as sexy as they make it look like on TV. Not at all. My career was my identity, and my career was my life, but I didn't realize that until after I left. And so I slept a lot. And I cried a lot. And what I thought was going to be this really exciting time of me being on a mountain doing yoga and just feeling free, it turned into a really dark time for me. It was a really scary time. But I'd always wanted to be a writer, so I said, well, I'll write. And I began writing about travel a lot, but being a travel writer is incredibly expensive, and I had just quit my job without a plan. So I decided, well, that's not a niche I'm going to break into. So at some point on one of the many freelancing sites I was on, a Greek man approached me, not a Nigerian prince, asking me to deposit money. And he asked me if I would be willing to write the S, the letter S, like Sam, section of, can I take my mask off?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I'm like,
You're 6 feet away.
okay, yes, I'll stay 6 feet away. I won't scream and I won't sing. So he asked me to write the S section of his wine blog's glossary. And at that point, I knew white, red, rosé, sparkling, and don't call it champagne if it's not champagne. I knew nothing about wine. But I'm a very literal person, and I love research and reading and organizing facts. And so for me, this started taking me out of that darkness. It gave me a purpose. Even though my husband is the most supportive person on the planet, I still felt kind of rudderless and like I just didn't know what to do with my life. So every morning I would wake up at like 5 and I'd head down to my little office under the stairs in the basement, and I would read about wine, something I knew literally nothing about. Around 10 or 11, I'd come up, I'd go for these long walks with my dogs, I'd listen to audiobooks, I'd do it, things around the house, and then I'd work a little more in the evening. And I found that I was building this connection to a topic that I knew nothing about. I was growing curious, I was reconnecting with my husband and with my friends, and I really did climb out of that depression. And I think if you asked me what it was that planted the seed of Couch and Cork, my business here in Bennington, it would probably be the term secondary aromas. So when you smell a wine, you see those people, those people, they're, oh, this wine smells like it was picked by a broken-hearted woman on a Tuesday. Can't stand those people. It's why everybody hates wine people. But secondary aromas are kind of interesting. So those are the things that you smell in a wine that the winemaker made a choice to put them there. So it can be like what temperature they fermented the wine at, or maybe if they used oak to age the wine. There are all these really interesting things they do, and then they end up smelling like vanilla or baking spice or dill. And you're just like, but it's grapes. But if you take some time with a glass of wine, you'll discover there's a lot hidden there. And so as I was writing these definitions, and especially the secondary aromas one, it kind of unfolded like a flower. And I felt like on every petal of the flower, there was like another word for me to dig into, another question, another thing to learn. And I know that there's probably a better analogy there with grapes and vines, but yeah, I missed it. So I really was getting obsessed, but I wasn't drinking wine. We were living in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I was drinking a lot of beer at the time. It's a beer town. So I said to my husband, there's a wine bar, let's go. And so we went and we tried to be those people. So I took my glass and I went, this smells like when you open one of those really cheap tins of black olives. Not good ones, not Calamados, those sliced ones that they put on nachos. And the sommelier was like, and said, brackish. And so in my head, I was like, I'm a learner, okay, if it smells like a tin can full of olives, it smells brackish. And then he looked at me and said, use aromas. So apparently you don't say smells in front of a winemaker, and you also never say it smells like the inside of a cheap tin can. I left that wine bar, and within an hour had signed up for my first wine class. It's fascinating. It's a science, but it's an art. There's a lexicon of terms that you kind of only know. It's like a secret society. But it's also a way to build community and to get to know people, because when you taste with others, you really form connections. So I took this wine class in New York City. It was very fancy. And they let me skip the introductory class because at that point I was considered a wine writer, even though I was writing about like counterfeit wine and investing in wine. They were like, you're a wine writer? And I was like, oh boy, not really. So I spent a weekend, about 10 hours a day, being constantly corrected by the instructor. I didn't mind that. And by the other students in my class who knew a lot more about wine. And I realized I was really outside of my depth. But being me, I didn't care. I didn't care that I didn't know anything because it meant I was going to learn even more about wine, and I was just obsessed. So, I would say like, smells like roses. And they would be like, smells like tomato leaf. And so I would write down, roses equal tomato leaves. I would say, this wine smells, sweet. And they would say, now it smells fruity. And I was like, okay, sweet equals fruity. So I'm taking this class where we taste 18 wines a day, 3 days in a row. And we're told you have to do this at home twice a month. And I'm like, 18 bottles to open a day, 3 days in a row. One, it's expensive. It's very expensive. But two, it's wasteful. That's so much wine that you have to open and drink in 3 days. And I'm good, but I am not that good. So being the country bumpkin in the New York City wine class, I made the mistake of asking the question, like a good girl, raise my hands. How do you do that? How do you drink 18 wine? Like, does everybody do that? How do you do that? And so the instructor said, well, you do it with your local tasting club. And I kid you not, the champagne collector who was in the class sitting behind me actually said, duh. And so instead of saying, okay, so I live in rural Vermont and we don't have a wine tasting club, I sent out an email to a group of friends when I walked back to my Airbnb that night and said, I'm gonna start a wine tasting club in Bennington. I'm putting it on Meetup as we speak. Let's get together Tuesday and let's do this. We're all gonna learn about wine together. We're in our 3rd year and we have over 60 members. We meet twice a month. Yeah, it's amazing. So if it was in that class that the seed was planted, it was in the club where Couch and Cork really began. We'd gather on Tuesday nights and taste, never 18 wines, that's excessive. And having been a middle school teacher, I would look at topics that I thought were really interesting and I would base a lesson around those. And so I would say, okay, Malbec, pretty popular grape. What's the difference between when it's grown in a warm climate and when it's grown in a cool climate? And we would explore this together, none of us knowing literally anything. Although I did pass my test, so I guess I knew something. I knew how to write a tasting note, but you need so much practice to do that. So that was something we regularly did. And so as my wine writing career, I now have over 200 publications, including a book, I would bring back things that I learned. So I went to France for a while, and then I brought back French wine, and I shared pictures and stories, and we learned a lot about French wine. I went to the Finger Lakes. We brought back Finger Lakes wine and talked about that. Yeah, love Finger Lakes, love Finger Lakes. And then when PR agents sent me wine, we would open those together, and I would share them. And I would always ask people, like, does anybody else want to present? Like, I don't always need to be the star of the show, even though I am the middle child. And everyone said, no, it's not about the wine. It's not about the wine. It was about people in Bennington, mostly transplants, coming together and sharing something. And it was wonderful, and it still is. We do it virtually now, which isn't quite the same, but it's wonderful. And I think what we all loved, me included, was no one ever corrected anybody. So if someone sniffed a glass and said, oh, that smells like Band-Aids, everybody else would sniff the glass and go, yeah, actually it does. And you didn't have that person who stepped in and said, well, actually, that's a Brettanomyces, and it's a yeast, and it causes that, but it's not a flaw. It was definitely intentional, because when it's a flaw, it kind of smells like raw meat and blood. Again, this is why we hate wine people. Not really, we love them. But it was kind of this safe space to say these things, and then you could say to someone, okay, I hear you saying Band-Aids, do you want to know the technical term for that? And if someone said no, we let them be. So I was writing during this time still to make some money, and I also started working for a fully remote digital marketing company. The universe did not want me to be a digital marketer. I did not want to be a digital marketer. And so in 2018, I wrote and published my first book, and then the company I was working for just shuttered out of nowhere. We got an email that said, bye, you don't have a job anymore. And I felt that darkness creeping in. I felt like, great, like once again, I don't have a source of income, I don't have something I'm doing regularly. Like, yeah, I have my tasting club and that's fun, but what am I supposed to be like doing with my life? So in May of 2019, on a complete whim, I went onto my author website, and I added in-home wine tastings and a price. I have no idea, well, I know now that that price was not right, but I just did it. I said, I love this. I love teaching. I've always loved teaching, and I'm really excited about wine. So people in my tasting club seem to like tasting with me. Maybe complete strangers will pay me to drink with them. And they did. And I think it's because the idea is really simple. It's, come drink with me. We'll have 5 bottles open, we'll share them, we'll talk about how they go with food, where they grow, what the people are like where they grow. No snobbery, no nonsense, no I have more wine certifications than you do. And it was absolute blast. I had about 4 of them. And then the pandemic hit, and I was just like, what are you doing to me? So at that point, I just didn't want to be sad. I just didn't want to do it. So I immediately put on my website, now virtual. I had no idea how to run a virtual tasting, but I learned really quickly. And I have to tell you, a year since then, it was May of 2019 when I did my first virtual with some people from the chamber. We're still bringing the joy of judgment-free tastings to people far and wide. We are now international. I had someone from Canada last week. But, you know, we've done some big things being here in Bennington. We have provided corporate tastings for companies like BP and GoDaddy, and we just recently got a contract with DoorDash, where we're now their official wine tasting company for their corporate tastings. So if anyone who works at DoorDash wants it for their team, they have to call Bennington, Vermont, and book a tasting with us. And it's exciting. It's really kind of cool to be like, oh my God, like, how did that happen? But I think for me, the best part is what we do here in town. You know, it's celebrating Jonah Spivak's wife's birthday, or getting together with Phil and Linda from the bookstore and celebrating Linda's mom's birthday because they couldn't see her because of the pandemic. It's partnering with places like Park McCullough, Bennington Museum, PAVE, who else? Karen's Place. Did you say Karen's Place? Huh? Did you say Karen's Place? Yes, Karen's Place. Did you get the email? Sign up. It's going to be fun. Oh, you'll be in Spain. That's going to be fun, too.
Yeah.
The Green Mountain Academy for Lifelong Learning. We were actually named the 2020 Chamber of Commerce Member of the Year. It's been a really good year for us. And I believe that couch+cork is successful, not because I'm some sort of wunderkid, although, I mean, a little bit. But I really think a lot of it is just the amazing support that we have found in Bennington. I really believe that Bennington is where I'm supposed to be, and that teaching, not middle schoolers anymore, is what I'm supposed to be doing. It does involve alcohol. I'm sure John reached for a drink that day when he had the 7th graders here. But I feel like Bennington has really embraced me and my business wholeheartedly and supported us. So like I said, I rewrote this like 7 times. It was a very therapeutic process. I don't think that I'd really thought about how do I tell people about my business. And then I asked my husband, I said, how do I tell them? And he said, just tell them how it happened. He's like, because it's weird the way it happened. So I read online, because Beth knows I'm neurotic. I was like, what is a classification talk? What do I have to talk about? And it said, talk about you. I'm not good at that. I can talk to you about wine. I'm not great about talking about me. But I figured I'd add a few little things. So I'm a natural teacher. I was born with my nose in a book and a pen in my hand, and I have not let go. When I get geeked out about something, like wine, I want everybody around me to be excited about it, but hopefully not in an obnoxious way. I prefer working on my own, although I don't like group projects, but professionally, I love connecting people. It's my favorite thing to get on these days, a Zoom, and have like 20 people I've never met before, and by the end, we feel like old friends. I'm married to my best friend. We live downtown above Jay's. I saw Jay in the back. And we have 2 dogs, a cat, and a lot of wine. Thanks for having me.
Questions?
Questions.
Question.
Go ahead.
Do you have any problem with the state liquor authority as far as selling wine or?
No,
not
so
selling?
I probably should have mentioned that. So we don't actually sell wine, but it's funny, whenever there's an event in town like Garlic Town or anything else, I get these drunk people calling me at 11 o'clock at night, like, where are you located? It says you're a liquor store. So we don't actually sell wine. We just sell wine education. So we do help people order wine for their parties, but we don't actually sell any wine. Yeah, that's how we get around that, because it's a nightmare.
This is off topic, but what year were you at the middle school?
So I started in 2002 at the old middle school, and I was there for 2 years, and then we moved up to
High school.
the one on the hill, the Jewel on the Hill, and I was there. I left in May of 2007. I got recruited by the National Education Association, the teachers union, so I worked for them for 8 years. 8 Blue, Watershed, Placer Cove. Placer Cove at the top.
Do you have a brick and mortar place? I mean, a store or a...
So we use our loft as our brick and mortar, and we're currently in the process of getting licensed to do clubs so we can have dinners up there. But right now, no, because we don't really sell anything other than wine education. Mike?
Okay, so say you wanted to have an event at somebody's home with, I don't know, X number of people. What happens? How does that happen? How does that come to fruition?
So you can contact us by phone, by email, social media. We immediately get in touch. We ask you a few questions. We send you a contract. And as long as you give us a day and a number of people, we handle everything else. You don't have to do anything.
How do you get the wine fast enough in a day?
Oh, I don't get it in a day. We usually tell people to book 2 weeks out.
Okay.
Yeah, but we get it pretty quick.
So I think it's a good idea to have a Rotary social sometime late September.
Why late September, Chris?
When you're back from Spain, will you bring some wine?
I don't know if I can. 2 bottles maybe. But
Yeah. Bring an extra suitcase.
We'll talk.
Yeah, so we handle everything. It's super easy.
So on parties like that, you order the wine, but they pay for it. I mean, you're
Yeah,
not
we just
selling it.
basically ordered on their behalf through like wine.com or
Oh.
it depends. There's also rules with like different states where you can order it, where it can go through the mail, where you have to pick it up. where it has to be delivered directly by the winery.
Yeah.
We're working with the
I tried to
Vermont
bring wine
legislature.
back from California, it's hard.
It's hard, yeah. So we're working right now on a bill with the Vermont legislature to make it more friendly to wine.
Good idea.
Yeah, and sherry import. I'm a certified sherry wine specialist, but I can't have any sherry sent to me in the mail. So that gets problematic. I have to like have it sent to my mom in New York, and haven't been there in over a year, so. Ah,
Can we talk about the pairings a little bit? Because like as a food person, that's especially appealing too. And I remember this camembert on a graham cracker at the museum.
was that at the museum?
Amazing.
Yeah, so we really pride ourselves in our ability to understand the science of food and wine pairing. So any tasting that we do, if you pick the wines, if we pick the wines, you get a full PDF document of what pairs with each wine, but we try to keep it really simple like that. So I think that was a semi-dry Riesling from the Finger Lakes, and we just spread, this was at the museum, we spread brie on graham crackers, and people were just like, what? It's like the most delicious thing ever. It's like having cheesecake and apple juice. You could just have cheesecake and apple juice, but this is better. Yeah,
Do you have a favorite Finger Lakes winery?
I do. Atwater is my favorite. I think it's on Seneca. And they are just doing like really crazy experimental stuff with like patinat and which is like it's like the original ancient champagnes where you let it ferment in the bottle and you have no idea what's going to happen. Sometimes the bottles explode, sometimes there's no fizziness, so it's kind of fun to see what different years bring about. But they're probably my favorite, I'd say. I also really do like Red Newt with their Circle
Yeah.
Riesling. I feel like that's just,
Yeah.
you always know it's going to be good.
Yeah.
There was a woman that worked at the chamber, her name was Hope Berry. I don't know if any of you guys remember Hope, but she lives up the street from me in Hoosick Falls. Her sons found it, you know them.
I met her at Garlic Town
Oh,
last
okay.
year.
And
Yeah.
the kids, the boys have a,
Barry Family Cellars, maybe?
yeah, it could be it. It's in the Finger Lakes,
Yep.
right?
Mhm. Yeah. That's my favorite one.
Now, for the Bennington groups, the wines are all available local?
Yeah, so for anything that our club tastes, I gave up the leading that just because I couldn't do it. I was too busy. But the woman who runs it, Linda, kind of picked up where I left off. And we use BBO, Dennis at BBO. We make sure he has it or can order it for us. And then we just send people there.
And that's the wine club you're talking about? As opposed
Yeah,
to
that's our
couch and
tasting
cork?
club. So they meet every other Wednesday.
What's the cost?
It's free.
Oh, it's free.
Yeah, so people just provide their own wine, or if when we'll go back eventually to hosting, usually the host will buy a couple of bottles, and so we just share the load. But it's completely free. We wanted it to be as accessible as humanly possible. And since I get sent a lot of wine, like people just send me boxes of wine, I have a really difficult life. I usually just bring those and say, put these in your cellar and use them when you will.
What do you do with your leftover wines?
Drink it. There's no such thing.
I was gonna offer to take more for you.
I mean, I usually ask for multiple bottles, so
Do you travel? That's a thought. Do you travel?
I do, yeah.
We have a family men's meeting on the mountain, and only you can't be, you gotta be a man to go there. And we have female fun forever down in Albany. But we had our own wine tasting last year, but it was hard to, we drank it all.
You did it right.
But
That's not tasting.
It would be nice to, I'll
Yeah.
run that past them, so
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll talk to you.
Thank you. Yeah, we travel, we do, we just extended into Georgia. People in Atlanta love us. And so we're actually doing a trip there this summer and have a couple of events booked so that people who've tasted with us virtually can see us in real life and taste with us in real life.
Cool.
And there's, I say us, there's me, and then I just hired my second employee. So I have a woman who's a recent graduate of Bennington College named Kaya, and she actually just got a fellowship to get her wine education fully paid for, which is incredible. And then there's a woman named Bridget who's out of Buffalo, and she is a certified specialist of wine, which is a very fancy wine certification. So she fills in when I can't do a tasting, or just sometimes I just need a night off.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.